Hey everybody, how's it going? Here again. It seems like such a long time, but it was just yesterday. So here for just a astrology question and answer, and dependent upon the way the conversation flows, Nakshatra talk, although I'm sure one will kind of blend into the other one. And the great thing about these impromptu ones is we can just go straight into things. We don't have to wait for people to get here. Just some rules of the road. I'm not here to answer questions about your own personal horoscope, intensive questions. The reason being is it's not helpful to you as an individual if I do that, because you have to take the whole horoscope into consideration. In those instances, I would just be giving you generalizations, which aren't really that good. So hello to all of you who are saying hello. Thank you for saying hello. We can talk about Punarvasu Nakshatra. We certainly can. You know, Punarvasu Nakshatra is a really interesting nakshatra. I keep finding out different facets of it and different angles of it. One of the things that tends to happen with Punarvasu nakshatra is things repeat themselves. And you'll find that happens over and over again. Because Punarvasu, kind of loosely translated, means once again a ray of light. But there's also a very nurturing energy about Punarvasu Nakshatra, because basically we can gain substance through Punarvasu Nakshatra. So Punarvasu Nakshatra provides an environment for things to come together. Right? Before things move into Pusha Nakshatra, which is more about the realization of the direction one needs to go in and the limitations that one will have to face upon the path. That's just a generalization about Punarvasu Nakshatra, but you might have had some other questions about that. So please feel free to post. Okay? So let's see how to decide what to do, business or job. That would require like 2 or 3 hour-and-a-half courses in order to teach that directly. It's not, I don't use any quick like one-step techniques. Most of my techniques take about 2 hours to even perform them. So I don't want to tell you that because it's not as simple as that. You have to kind of figure out what the career planets are. You have to figure out if they're being activated by dashas. You have to figure out if the individual can earn from those planets, all sorts of things, right? And then you have to look at nakshatras. Okay. So is anybody else having a problem with the audio? Because somebody posted no audio, but it might just be them directly. So let's see if anybody else is having audio problems. And if you are, please feel free to let me know. I'm not going to say anything else until somebody tells me whether they've got audio or not. But on my end, I have audio showing. Right? So I'm just going to wait until somebody else says audio or no audio. Okay, everybody else can hear me loud and clear. So somebody says key essence of Punarvasu Nakshatra. That's a very difficult question to answer. I will tell you why that is a difficult question to answer. And to those of you who are having problems with audio, refresh your page. Exit out and come back in again, okay? Because nobody else is having problems. The reason it's difficult to identify the key essence of a nakshatra is nakshatras have several different facets, right? And the facet that is going to come out of that particular nakshatra is going to be determined by the planet that's in that nakshatra. And in addition to that, the planets that are influencing the planet in that nakshatra. And that tends to determine what comes out of that nakshatra. Punarvasu nakshatra can be a very nurturing nakshatra. It can be about nourishing those things that are important to us. It can be about determining the things that are important to us. It can be about returning to a space where we can pull together our energy. There are so many different factors of Punarvasu Nakshatra that to just say one simple thing would be quite difficult. That's interesting. So somebody's saying Lord Ram was born in Punarvasu Nakshatra. Well, that makes sense because he was an incarnation of Vishnu. So once again, a ray of light. There you go. Okay, I'm not going to answer questions about people's horoscopes, just so everybody knows, okay? I would have to analyze your entire horoscope, and I'm not going to do off-the-cuff assessments. And asking a question like, how would Venus Dasha be? Well, everybody's dashas are going to have ups and down periods. It's not like you have some dasha and the entire dasha goes really wonderful every single day of your life. Some areas are good, some areas are bad, and that's just the way it tends to work, okay? So let's see some other questions that we have here. Okay, so people are just kind of asking, and it's okay to do that, some general questions generally about nakshatras. But, you know, if you can get a little more specific, we might be able to fine-tune some things about the nakshatras, and I might be able to give you a little more information rather than just saying Purva, Ashadha nakshatra, please, because I could tell you so many things about each particular nakshatra, and I'm really wanting to instead fine-tune it to a process that's going to be giving you information that you're looking for and not repeating stuff that you already know, okay? Why is it that Uttara Ashadha is the only nakshatra without a mate? I didn't know it was the only nakshatra without a mate. So I'm not sure what you really mean by that. Here's a good question. Somebody's asking, do nakshatras exist in the Navamsha? There are so many different ways to work with the nakshatras. There are some people who create a different set of nakshatras for each Varga chart, dependent upon the degree in the Varga chart. And then there are other people who take the nakshatra position from the Rashi chart, and no matter which Rashi that planet is in a particular Varga chart and what degree it's going to be in the same nakshatra it was in from the Rashi chart. I tend to do that. I take the same nakshatra from the Rashi chart because in my thinking, I think of nakshatras as being more astronomically oriented. And so the astronomy that begins to happen within a person's horoscope is from the Rashi chart. The Rashi chart shows the astronomy, whereas the rest of the charts are just the carving up of the Rashi chart. Okay? So let's see what else we've got here on our questions. Okay. Let's scroll back up because questions are popping up quickly. So I have to scroll back up and see what I might have missed. Jupiter in Hasta Nakshatra. Well, people think of Hasta Nakshatra as manifesting things, right? And, you know, because it has the power of taking what one is trying to gain and placing it in one's hand. And so it does have that type of energy to it, but generally that is achieved through resistance, right? So Jupiter is very expansive. So as Jupiter is trying to expand, it's encountering that resistance in trying to manifest something, because really, if you want to have something crystallize, there has to be both a force and there has to be a form, right? In order for the form to come into being, it requires that the force meets opposition, okay? So it is somewhat of an obstructive nakshatra on some levels, okay? So, you know, a lot of you are posting questions, and I'm not criticizing your questions. I'm just kind of trying to help you to understand. So saying things like Jupiter in Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra, I can only give you generalizations with that because it's going to depend on a lot of the influences that are there. So Jupiter in Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra can make it so that a person likes to really follow those beliefs that inspire them very deeply, right? If it's there with Mars and perhaps Saturn, there could be some problems with anger that then tend to elevate or escalate. So as you can see, it really depends on a lot of the different factors that are there, which the general reason I don't like giving these just very generalized assumptions is they're going to end up being very broad, okay? But we're here to talk about nakshatras, so we can definitely talk about those things. And we're also here to answer any astrology questions in general. And by answering astrology questions, I don't mean answering questions about your particular horoscope. What I mean is any questions you might have about how astrology works or how different components in astrology work. Okay? Well, effect of Saturn in Sagittarius show its effects right away as soon as it enters on 26th of October. That depends on the Dasha period that the individual is in, right? It's going to be giving some effects of the place that it enters, but in terms of the specific concrete effects that you might either be worried about or hoping for, a lot of that is Dasha dependent, okay? Kritika Nakshatra characteristics. Kritika Nakshatra people, generally dependent upon the sun, are going to be very straightforward and honest. They can be prone to speaking the truth, even if other people don't want to hear it. Sometimes they can speak bluntly and occasionally without a level of tact. The sun is a dry planet, so the sun just does what needs to be done. And so when it comes to truth, then the individual will speak the truth in a very firm manner and in a very strong manner, regardless of how the other person feels about it. Because from that person's perspective, the Kritika Nakshatra person, the best thing to do is to just come out with that, because that's going to be most helpful to the individual. Okay? Now take a drink of tea and read people's questions because my throat's getting raw. Somebody's asking, does the Ascendant Nakshatra have a strong influence on a person, or are the Dasha cycles going to determine when it has an active influence? Well, all planets with being in a Nakshatra and Ascendant being in a Nakshatra, they're always there in the background, and that's how you generally approach those specific things, like the Ascendant. How do you approach being yourself and whatever your Ascendant Nakshatra is, right? Those will always be there in the background, but they are obviously going to be more active during the dashas of the dispositor of that particular nakshatra. Okay, let's read some other questions here. Somebody's asking a question, is Atma Karaka Nakshatra even more important than Chandra in predicting life themes? You have to understand those things differently. Okay, the moon is our consciousness. It's how we perceive things. It's how we react to things. It's how our sensory mind picks up on things and processes things. The Atma Karaka is just the self. So those are very similar things, but they're different aspects of the same thing, right? The Atma Karaka is on a certain level like the entire self encompassing the soul, in addition to that encompassing a little bit of consciousness, but the moon is going to focus more on the consciousness, the reactionary side of the individual. So it's not that one is more important, it's just that one is more subjective, as in the moon, and the other one has a little bit more of a tonality of being objective, which would be more of the Atma Karaka. Okay? Okay, let's see what else we've got here. While I'm looking at people's questions, just a reminder, I've got some upcoming courses in March of next year. If you register before December, you'll get a discount. Also, please feel free to visit my astrological services page if you want me to more fully answer questions about your particular horoscope. How is the dasha of the Atma Karaka? That depends on the Atma Karaka and influences to it. But what I think you might be asking is, what is the major theme of that? Well, that's really going to be the time that the individual becomes focused more fully on becoming themselves and who they are. If that planet is having difficulties or it's afflicted, that's going to be a difficult path. If it's got a lot of support, that's going to be a very helpful path. Which areas of life that's going to take its precedence in is obviously going to be determined by the well-being or lack of well-being of that Atma Karaka in those particular Varga charts. So for instance, If the Atma Karaka is strong with a lot of good influences in the Rashi chart, that will be a very powerful path of the individual becoming themselves. But if it's debilitated, say, in the Navamsha or the Saptamsha, there can be a lot of relationship difficulties, right? Okay. Does the difficulty of the sixth house increase if it's Arja Nakshatra? Not necessarily. It depends on the well-being of Rahu's dispositor, in addition to the well-being of Saturn, because Saturn plays a key role in understanding Rahu-related things. Okay. What is the role of the nakshatra of the sun? Well, the sun is the Atman. It's the soul. It's the soul of the individual that's just on its path, doing what it's meant to do. It is the natural Atma Karaka, right? The moon, remember, is the consciousness. It's how we react to things, how we go about understanding things, how we fulfill our needs, all of those things, different aspects of the self. Okay, so let's see some of the other questions we might have here. Saturn in Moola Nakshatra. Well, if that's a difficult Saturn and basically Ketu is poorly placed in your chart, then that can be a very difficult experience of Saturn, but it will take you to the very root of a situation. But that doesn't mean you're going to have a difficult Saturn period if you've got your Saturn in Moola necessarily, because we have to take your entire horoscope into account. How does Mercury operate in Ashlesha Vargotama in D9 when it's 10th? Okay, you know what? That's too convoluted for me for right now. So again, I don't want to go into complex things that are more than likely, obviously, horoscope interpretations for an individual. I'm not here to interpret your horoscope for you, but you can feel free to schedule a consultation with me, and I will do that. Because really I need to have your chart in front of me. I need to look at all the Varga charts, all of those things. Okay, but let me just take a brief look at your question, see if I can understand it more deeply. So a lot of your question, the person who asked that, will depend upon Saturn. It will depend upon Mars. It will depend upon what dasha you're in. Okay, so I'm not going to go too deeply into that, but that should point you in the right direction. That's what I can do with questions like that. I can point you in the right direction. Okay. For progeny, which nakshatra do we need to watch? What do you mean for progeny? What nakshatra do you need to watch? For the potential of having children? Or do you mean for your children? Which of those things do you mean? Okay. I'm not really understanding your question. Let's see some other questions that we've got here. So I do want to say something to everyone. I do not mind telling you general things in association with some of the questions that you're posting, but some of you are posting questions that really all I can give you is a general interpretation of. In terms of working with nakshatras, this might be good for me to let you know. One of the things that I tend to do is I take the strength of the planet and I kind of convert that into a base 60 number based on several different things like the Baladi Avastas, the Jagradati Avastas, the dignity of the planet. I'm going to look at that in terms of determining how that planet is going to function in just the Rashi chart. And so that's going to let me know whether that nakshatra will bear some good or bad fruits. I also use something called the Shayanadi Avastas in order to determine how the individual is going to approach that. So there are a lot of different factors that I take into account. So just giving you general answers to things like that, they're just going to be very general. Best nakshatra for the moon, all the nakshatras are the best nakshatra for the moon. Okay, it depends on the well-being of your moon. So there's not just one nakshatra that's going to be the best nakshatra for the moon. Somebody posted a good question. That's actually a good question, right? Somebody said, seeing the placement of a certain planet in the same nakshatra house in both the parents and the child's charts. Any thoughts on that? Well, dependent on the well-being of the nakshatra dispositor, dependent upon the well-being of the planets, dependent upon the interaction of the nodes between those two individuals' charts. The parent and the child have a lot to learn from each other in that particular regard in terms of growing that planet, because that's what nakshatras do. They basically grow planets in a certain way. Or if you've got a house cusp in a nakshatra, then it's about growing that nakshatra. Okay, somebody else asks, is it common for family members to have several overlapping signs and nakshatras? You see that quite often, actually. You'll also see that in charts of people who have several children, there will be often a predominance of elements. Like some people will have water sign children, some people will have fire sign children. And that's an interesting concept because there's a connection that obviously the parent is needing to learn from the child. And obviously, it's something that the child is needing to learn from the parent in regards to the elemental qualities of the rashis and equally the influence of the nakshatras, right? I hope that was a clear answer. Okay, let's see. Boy, people have posted a lot of questions. So if somebody is saying that Rohini is the best nakshatra for the moon, it may or may not be. It depends on what you're trying to achieve with your moon or what you're hoping for with your moon, right? Let's say you've got, so, you know, we can say that the moon in Rohini nakshatra might be good, but what if that's a waning moon? And what if you've got Saturn influencing it and Rahu influencing it and Mars influencing it? Is that still going to be the best nakshatra for the moon? Might not be. You have to take all these things into consideration. You can't just say Rohini is the best nakshatra for the moon. Now, granted, with Rohini, as the mythology goes, Rohini was the most favored wife of the moon, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the best nakshatra for the moon. It's going to be on a per chart basis, and it's going to relate to, although different people may disagree with me, it's going to relate to the well-being of the nakshatra dispositor and whether the moon is waxing or waning and whether that moon is afflicted by a lot of planets. And hey, all of these things you can learn on my nakshatra course coming up this spring. And you get a 15% discount if you register early. Okay, I'll shut up about it now. All right, let's see what else we've got. For progeny, okay. Yes, it is not going to always be. So somebody says for progeny, transit of Saturn and Jupiter over which nakshatra really triggers childbirth. For childbirth, I use different techniques. Right? First of all, I will see if that individual is going to have children using Jaimini techniques. After I've done that, I want to see when the conception is going to be by looking at the 7th in the Saptamsha. And after I do that, I want to see when the birth is going to be, looking at the 5th and other factors in the Saptamsha as well, and looking at transits and things like that. I generally don't find that one particular nakshatra is going to trigger childbirth. But in terms of nakshatras connected to children, Bharani nakshatra is one nakshatra that's connected to children, but it doesn't mean that the transit has to happen, that Saturn and Jupiter have to be transiting Bharani nakshatra for a person to have a child, nor does it mean if Saturn or Jupiter are transiting Bharani nakshatra, the person's going to have a child, right? You have to look at the full horoscope. Does the ability of Atma Karaka change with different nakshatra in Varga chart? Which one should we see? I'm not sure if I understand your question. Okay, first of all, I don't look at different nakshatras in the Varga chart. I keep the nakshatra from the Rashi chart because I look at nakshatras as being astronomical in their orientation. Okay. Oh, the horizon, somebody said, please repeat about 15% discount. On my upcoming courses, which start next spring, start next March, if you register for either my foundation level course, which will teach you the basics of Vedic astrology in a very organic manner and teach you good predictive techniques. And also I'm starting a nakshatra course that starts about the same time in March. And if you register before the 4th of December for one of those, I forget which is which, and 11th of December for the other one, you get a 15% discount. You can either register in full and get a 15% discount on the price, or you can pay by the first trimester and get a 15% discount on not only the first trimester, but all the remaining trimesters, okay? So that would amount to, for a 44-week course, I'm just going to say it and then I'll be done, a 44-week course that starts in March and lasts until the following February. And each class is recorded, so if you miss a class, no worry about it. You can catch up with the video. But if you registered in full, it would be $764 if you register before early December. If you register by trimester, it's $279. Okay, that amounts to about $20 US per class, really. All right. All right, let's see what everybody else is saying. I wish I could download all this information and know it all too. The thing is even if you are an astrologer, you're always learning. It's always learning, okay? How much in full for that course? I think I just told you, $764 for the basic course or the Nakshatra course. Oh, and by the way, if you want to register for both at the same time, you get a 20% discount off of each of those, all right? Is Moola Nakshatra to go back to, oh, and by the way, the link is on my website. After this video has processed, I'll put it in the video. But if you go to AuthenticAstrology.com and go to the courses page, you'll see that there are 2 courses listed. Is Moola Nakshatra to go back to the roots and stick to tradition, or is it to uproot tradition and plant new roots? A little bit of both. I think Moola Nakshatra is about, and it's not always about roots as in tradition, it's about getting to the root of things, going deeply with things, all of those things. So in terms of going back to the roots and sticking to tradition, the person may get so stuck with tradition to the extent that that tradition doesn't work, and they get furious about that, and then they uproot the tradition. That's generally how Moola works. Okay, let's read some other questions. I'm noticing people are posting some questions rather rapidly here, which is good. Okay, so if I'm quiet, it's because I'm reading some of your questions. The D60's Lagna Nakshatra, in terms of how I interpret things, is going to be the same as the Nakshatra in your Rashi chart. Okay? Because I consider nakshatras to be more astronomically oriented. They're the fixed stars. Of course, each nakshatra, if you were to look at the actual stars, is not exactly 1320, but there is more of an astronomical connection to the nakshatras. And so I tend to stick with the nakshatras from the Rashi chart and transplant them to the Varga charts, which isn't saying that other people who do differently are wrong for their calculations and what they do. It's just this is what I found to work best for me. Okay? Let's see what else we've got. Planet in the 4th pada will also have influence of the next nakshatra. What might be going on with that is an astronomical thing, because when a planet is at the 4th pada of a nakshatra, it's beginning to get closer to the next nakshatra. You might find a little bit of that, okay? So somebody's saying, my brain is going to explode. I've only been self-studying for 3 months. Take a break for like a few days, and then you'll recognize how much you've learned, okay? Let's see what else we've got. Does a slow-moving planet or node transiting a prominent nakshatra, okay, I just lost your question, in a chart trigger effects similar to a dasha cycle, even if its dasha is not running? Dashas are completely different things. It's just a longer lasting transit over a particular nakshatra. And so that planet is going to work in coordination with that nakshatra for a longer period of time, but it's not going to necessarily function like a dasha cycle. If you're not in the dasha cycle of that of the nakshatra that's being transited, the dispositor of that nakshatra, then it's not going to be as powerful as if you were in the dasha period of that. The Ascendant Nakshatra and Atma Karaka Nakshatra are the same. Does it mean more emphasis on life path? It can be, but it depends on the well-being of that particular Nakshatra dispositor in each different Varga chart, right? On the Vargas that it's weaker at, it's going to be more difficult. In the Vargas that it's stronger in, if it's strong in the Rashi chart, there's going to be more emphasis on life path because the Rashi chart is about the life path, okay? One thing you'll learn is in astrology, there are no set 100% rules all the time. A lot of it depends on planetary influence. I'm just commenting because I know somebody's saying Pada 4 depends on degree. So it can. It doesn't always do that, though. Let's see what else we've got. Going through Saturn Mahadasha, so will I see the effect of the transit on the 26th of October itself? Generally, you're always going to see effects of Saturn. A lot of it is Dasha dependent. I can't really translate that for you unless I'm reading your particular horoscope. If you were in Saturn, and your Saturn was exalted and you entered Saturn on the very first day of Saturn's transit through Sagittarius, then you might begin to experience some things like that. But I mean, there's no 100% fast rules with that. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Somebody asked a question. Can I say something about Kala Sarpa Yoga? Well, if you're somebody who likes to control everything in your life, Kala Sarpa Yoga is going to be something that's very difficult for you. If you're somebody who wants to learn how to surrender to God, then Kala Sarpa Yoga is going to be very beneficial for you. That's the one gift that Kala Sarpa Yoga brings, is it teaches you surrender, because basically it makes it so you don't have any other choice. Okay? Let's see what other questions we have. And I'm probably going another 9 minutes or so. Wow, there's a lot of people posting questions here. Let's see if I can catch up. If the moon is weak, then Ascendant Nakshatra becomes more important? No, and here's the thing that a trap that people often fall into when trying to interpret things in astrology is they want to go, which factor is more important? It's not a matter of one thing being more important than another. It's about all those factors complementing each other and bringing all those different things together in order to create the complexity of an individual's consciousness. That's what astrology is about. So you can't just go, this is more important, I'll just look at this. You have to look at it all, which is why I don't do the general off-the-cuff assessments of people's, horoscope placements when they place it in the chat window, because it's the complexity of a human consciousness. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Okay. Just catching up on people's questions. Somebody said, please make a video on Kala Sarpa Yoga. The reason I'm not wild about making videos on yogas is because yogas are dependent upon the strength of the planets. So one person might have a yoga in their chart, and then they think, oh, well, this is going to be really horrible, like Kala Sarpa Yoga. But let's say that, both Rahu and Ketu's dispositors are exalted in their chart, and some other factors that are there that make both of those planets strong, then that Kala Sarpa Yoga might yield more beneficial results than it will detrimental results. So with yogas, you can't always say that they're going to function really wonderfully, and you can't always say that they're going to function weakly. You have to look at the strength of the planets that are involved and whether those planets are creating more harm in the horoscope or whether they're doing more benefit. And that's what determines whether a yoga is functional or really weak. right? That's why I don't like doing general videos on yogas, which you'll probably notice I hardly ever do videos on yogas. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Mercury and Moola in Vargotama, good or bad? There's no such thing as a good planet, and there's no such thing as a bad planet. Planets are planets, and they do what they do for the evolution of your consciousness. Some of them create good things in one particular area of your life, and they sometimes create bad things in others. Mercury and Moola in Vargotama, a lot of it is going to depend upon the influences to that Mercury and the influences to that Ketu. That's just in your Rashi chart. And it also depends on which Dasha period you're in, okay? Somebody says, can I talk about a Gandanta position? Of goodness, I've lost your question already. Let's see what we've got. Okay, I've lost somebody's question. Gandanta position of the Atma Karaka. Well, one thing I will say about Gandanta positions are not that difficult if you've got a good solid Mercury in your chart. If you've noticed, all the Gandanta Nakshatras are associated with Mercury, right? Why is that? Mercury gives us discrimination. It also gives us discernment. It gives us the capacity to see things objectively. So when we're going through transitional type energy, things can be a bit scattered, and we need a good solid Mercury in order to sort that out. So if you've got your Atma Karaka is in a Gandanta position, if you've got a good solid Mercury, you're not really going to be as confused as somebody who maybe has a debilitated Mercury, right? If that helps. I hope that helps. Okay, let's see some of the other questions. I've got 4 more minutes, and then I have to go, people. So if I miss your question, I'm sorry, I'll have to catch it the next time. Wealth is not determined just by a planet being in the 12th house of losses. A lot of it is determined by many different factors in your horoscope. Also looking at the Hora chart, the Chaturtamsha chart, various periods of your life. People tend to approach astrology with this thought that I'm going to have this one period in my life where I become wealthy and everything just stays that way for the rest of my life. Talk to people who have wealth, and they still have fluctuations and ups and downs, and sometimes they don't feel as wealthy as they do at other times. So life financially is always going to be filled with some ups and downs, but you can't determine wealth just by one particular factor in a horoscope. Those factors that you see in horoscopes, like the wealth lord being placed in the 12th, they are things that can point in the direction of there being problems with finances, but you have to have a lot of other factors come into the equation in order to make that solid. In astrology, we're always looking for confluence, not just one particular factor. We want to look at several different factors, okay? All right, let's see what other questions we have. I might have time for 1 or 2 more. Let's see. Mercury in Gandanta and Ashleisha Nakshatra is dependent upon the well-being of that Mercury, right? But it depends. And by well-being, I don't just mean the dignity. I mean the Baladiyavastas, the Jagradadiyavastas, the planets that are planetary aspecting, the planets that are Rashi aspecting, all of those things. Okay? Rahu in Chitra, bad for relationships? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. The individual may feel somewhat unloved or abandoned, but that's a perspective. And that perspective is not always the actual concrete reality. So if there are problems with that, then it's sometimes a matter of shifting perspective. And it's also a matter of trying to be more solid with your ethics or your beliefs so that other people see you as being that way. let's see what we've got here. One more question. Samir, I'm trying to catch up with your question, and I haven't found it yet because of everybody's responses. Somebody's saying Rahu in Gemini, 6th house having Ardra Nakshatra. Well, I can only give you a generalization about that, right? One thing I would say in general is things are not always going to happen because of what you think that you know. And the more you struggle to obtain results, the less far you're going to get. And the more you just try to trust and have faith, more than likely the better things will work out. But that's a vast generalization, okay, based on just 2 factors in your horoscope, okay? All right, everybody, just a reminder, if you want to schedule a consultation with me, you can do that through my website, the Astrological Services page. And if you would like to register for my 2 courses, you can do that on the courses page of my website. I have to go, people, because I have some more work to do. But I will see you all next time. And please do know I appreciate all of your questions. It's just I like giving honest answers to questions. And I don't want people to start thinking things about their horoscope that don't come true just by asking a question based on 1 or 2 things. Okay? So basically, if you're asking about a planet or 2 planets placement in your chart, I can only give you a generalization that may prove to be about 60%. If I look at your horoscope, I can probably get much higher with that. Okay? All right, take care, everyone. I will talk to you all the next time that I'm here. Bye now.